I was lying on that operating table when the anesthesiologist leaned in close and whispered 6 words that made my blood run cold. "Ma'am, postpone until tomorrow. Please." He was a complete stranger. He had no reason to risk his career, his reputation, maybe even his life to warn me. But the desperate panic in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. If I let them put me under that day, I might never wake up. And the most terrifying part? The person who wanted me dead wasn't some stranger in a dark alley. He was standing right there in that pre-op room, smiling at me, holding my hand, playing the role of concerned husband, while secretly counting down the minutes until I would be gone forever. What I discovered in the days that followed shattered everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my life, and the family I'd been trying so desperately to please for 3 years. Some secrets are buried so deep that uncovering them means risking everything. But staying silent? That means losing your life. This is the story of how a stranger's whispered warning saved me from a fate that had already claimed other victims before me. A story about trust, betrayal, and the terrifying realization that the most dangerous place you can be is sometimes right next to the person who promised to love you forever. If you want to know how this story ends and discover the shocking truth that brought down an entire family, make sure to follow this channel, leave a like if you're already hooked, and comment below where you're watching from. You won't believe what happened next. I'll never forget the cold, sterile smell of that pre-op room at Mercy Hospital in Tacoma. I was 27 years old, lying on that narrow gurney with my hands sweating in silence, trying not to look at my husband, Ethan. He was standing there in the corner, speaking in hushed tones with a nurse who kept avoiding my eyes. Something between them felt rehearsed. Something off. I'd already carried so many emotional wounds from his family. The mother-in-law who said I wasn't good enough. The sister-in-law who accused me of jealousy. The silent contempt at every holiday dinner. But nothing could have prepared me for what was about to happen in that room. When the anesthesiologist approached, the world seemed to slow down. He had steady hands, tired eyes, and an expression of contained panic that made my stomach drop. As he adjusted the mask over my face, he leaned in so close I could feel his breath trembling against my cheek. And then, in a threat of a voice that seemed ripped from deep inside his chest, he whispered, "Ma'am, postpone until tomorrow. Please, don't go under today." My body froze. He didn't explain. He didn't dare repeat it. He just pulled away quickly when he noticed Ethan watching. The sensation was like someone had pulled the floor out from under my feet. Up until that moment, I thought my biggest enemy was just in my head. But there, in that whispered sentence, there was a warning, a cry for help. For me. I lay there paralyzed, the mask hovering over my face, the anesthesiologist standing at a distance now, and my husband smiling, a smile that had never seemed so empty to me before. Something was about to happen to me. And for the first time, I felt real fear. Fear of falling asleep in the presence of the man I had married. The fluorescent lights above me buzzed with an irritating hum that seemed to match the racing of my heart. I could hear the mechanical beep of monitors in the adjacent operating room, the shuffle of nurses' shoes on linoleum, the distant sound of a stretcher being wheeled down the corridor. Everything felt hyper-real, like I was watching my own life from outside my body. My fingers clutched the thin hospital blanket, so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The 4 in my left hand felt cold, foreign, like it didn't belong to me. Ethan's voice cut through my fog. "Honey, you're being dramatic again." His tone was light, almost amused, but there was an edge underneath it. Impatience, maybe frustration. He walked over and placed his hand on my shoulder, and I flinched. Actually flinched. When had I started being afraid of my own husband's touch? The anesthesiologist was now at the medication cart, his back to us, but I could see his shoulders were tense, rigid. His hands moved mechanically as he prepared the syringes, but there was something deliberate about his slowness, like he was buying time. Or maybe hoping I would listen to him. The nurse who'd been whispering with Ethan earlier glanced at me with what I could only describe as pity. Not concern. Pity. Like she was looking at someone who was already gone. I don't feel right, I heard myself say, my voice cracking. Can we reschedule? Just for a day. Ethan's jaw tightened. I saw it. That micro-expression he always made when I was inconveniencing him. We've been planning this for weeks, Sarah. The surgeon cleared his schedule. Everyone's here. You're just nervous. It's normal. But it wasn't normal. Nothing about this was normal. My intuition, that voice I'd learned to silence over 3 years of marriage, the voice that told me something was wrong when his family excluded me from Thanksgiving photos, when his sister made comments about my weight, when his mother insisted on keeping Ethan's ex-girlfriend's picture on the mantel. That voice was screaming now. The anesthesiologist turned around, and for a split second, our eyes met. His were dark, haunted, and filled with something I couldn't quite name. Regret? Guilt? Or maybe recognition, like he'd seen this exact scenario before and knew how it ended. He gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head, so slight that if I'd blinked I would have missed it. My mind raced back to the weeks leading up to this surgery. It was supposed to be routine, a minor procedure to remove a benign cyst. Nothing dangerous, nothing urgent, but Ethan had been oddly insistent about the timing. "Let's get it done before the holidays," he'd said. "Before it gets more complicated." His family had been strangely involved too, asking questions about my medical history, my insurance, my will, things that felt intrusive but that I'd dismissed as concern. Now, lying on this gurney with a stranger's desperate warning echoing in my ears, all those puzzle pieces started to shift. They didn't quite fit together yet, but the picture they were forming made my blood run cold. "I need to use the bathroom," I said suddenly, sitting up. The room spun for a moment, adrenaline making me dizzy. "Sarah," Ethan started, his hand reaching for my arm. "Now." I pulled away from him, my bare feet hitting the cold floor. The nurse moved toward me, but I was already walking, then half running toward the hallway. Behind me, I heard Ethan's frustrated sigh and his footsteps following. But I didn't care, because something in that anesthesiologist's whisper had awakened a survival instinct I didn't know I still possessed. Something primal and raw that told me if I let them put me under in that room, I might never wake up. The bathroom door closed behind me, and I locked it with shaking hands. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, pale, thin, with dark circles under my eyes from months of poor sleep. When had I become this person? This ghost of who I used to be? I pressed my palms against the cold sink and tried to steady my breathing. Through the door, I could hear muffled voices. Ethan's smooth, persuasive tone explaining to someone that I was just anxious and needed a moment. The nurse's sympathetic murmur. And then another voice, the anesthesiologist's, saying something I couldn't quite make out, but his tone was urgent, almost pleading. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers. Who could I call? My parents had sided with Ethan months ago when I'd tried to explain how isolated I felt. My best friend had moved to Portland last year. I had no one. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I was completely alone. A knock on the door made me jump. "Mrs. Patterson?" It was the nurse. "Are you all right in there?" No, I wasn't all right. Nothing was all right. A man I didn't know had just risked his job, maybe his life, to warn me against a surgery that everyone else was pushing me toward. My husband, who was supposed to love and protect me, was acting like my fear was an inconvenience rather than something valid. And somewhere deep in my gut below conscious thought, I absolutely knew, that if I walked back into that operating room, something terrible was going to happen. "I'm coming out," I said, my voice stronger now. "But I'm not having the surgery today." The silence on the other side of the door was deafening. Then Ethan's voice, tight with barely controlled anger. "Sarah, stop being ridiculous. Open the door." And in that moment, hearing my husband speak to me like I was a disobedient child, rather than a grown woman expressing legitimate concern, something inside me broke. Or maybe it finally healed. Because I realized that the most dangerous place I could be wasn't on that operating table. It was in a marriage where no one believed me when I said I was afraid. My voice failed when I tried to reschedule the surgery. They insisted. Ethan insisted even harder. But that anesthesiologist's look, that silent desperation, was pulsing in my mind like a warning siren I couldn't turn off. I invented a sudden pain, clutching my abdomen and wincing convincingly enough that they had no choice but to let me go. It was only in the corridor, walking away from that pre-op room, that I realized my entire body was trembling. I didn't know if I was being paranoid, or if someone really wanted me to never wake up from that table. When I went to the reception desk to reschedule, the receptionist avoided looking at me directly, her eyes darting to her computer screen, then to the papers on her desk, anywhere but my face. Another staff member whispered something while looking at me with pity, that same expression I'd seen on the nurse's face earlier. It felt like everyone knew something I didn't know, like I was the only person not in on some terrible secret that involved my own life. And then, when Ethan stepped outside to take a phone call in the parking lot, something he'd been doing more and more lately, always walking away from me when his phone rang, the anesthesiologist passed by me quickly. Too quickly. But as he did, he dropped something deliberately on the floor. A folded card. I watched it flutter down in what felt like slow motion, landing near my foot. I waited until he was gone before bending down to pick it up. My fingers were shaking so badly, I almost couldn't unfold it. Inside, written in hurried handwriting that pressed hard enough to almost tear through the paper, was a single sentence. Don't trust him. The world tilted. I had to grip the edge of the reception desk to steady myself. Don't trust him. Don't trust who? But I already knew. Deep down, in that place where we store truths too painful to acknowledge, I already knew. A question started hammering inside my mind, heavy as stone, relentless as a heartbeat. Why would a complete stranger be willing to risk his job, or even his own life, just to stop me from entering that operating room? Nothing made sense. But I knew with a certainty that made my skin crawl, that I needed to find out. I slipped the card into my purse just as Ethan walked back through the automatic doors. His face was flushed, and there was something in his expression I'd never seen before. Anger? Frustration? No, it was deeper than that. It looked almost like disappointment, like something he'd been planning hadn't worked out the way he wanted. Ready to go home? He asked, his voice artificially cheerful, that same tone he used when his mother criticized my cooking and he wanted to smooth things over. Yeah, I managed to say, though my throat felt like it was closing up. The drive home was suffocating. Ethan didn't speak, but the silence wasn't comfortable. It was thick and oppressive, filling every inch of space in the car until I felt like I couldn't breathe. His hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly, his knuckles white. Every few minutes, he'd glance at me from the corner of his eye, studying me like I was a problem he needed to solve. I stared out the window, watching Tacoma blur past. The coffee shops on 6th Avenue, the old brick buildings downtown, Mount Rainier visible in the distance under the gray November sky. Everything looked normal. Everything looked like it always did. But nothing felt normal anymore. It was like I'd been living in a photograph of my life, a flat, two-dimensional version of reality, and someone had just torn it open to show me what was really underneath. You embarrassed me today, Ethan said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, measured, which somehow made it worse. The doctor cleared his entire afternoon. The surgical team was ready. Do you know how hard it was to schedule this? I'm sorry. I heard myself say automatically, that programmed response I'd developed over 3 years of trying to keep the peace. But then I stopped. Why was I apologizing? For listening to my instincts? For being afraid? Actually, no. I'm not sorry. Something didn't feel right. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. Something didn't feel right. That's your medical opinion, is it? You've been watching too many true crime shows, Sarah. But I hadn't been. I'd been living in one. When we got home to our small rental house on the north end of town, the one his mother said was beneath him, but that we could barely afford on our combined salaries, Ethan went straight to the garage. He always went to the garage when he was upset, tinkering with his tools, organizing and reorganizing his workbench. I stood in our kitchen, still holding my purse with that card burning inside it like evidence at a crime scene. I waited until I heard the garage door close. Then I went to our bedroom and did something I'd never done before. I started looking through his things. The first drawer of his dresser held nothing unusual. Socks, underwear, old t-shirts from college. The second drawer the same. But the third drawer, the one at the bottom that stuck a little when you pulled it, that's where I found the envelope. It was hidden under a stack of winter sweaters he never wore. A manila envelope, unsealed, bulging with papers. My hands shook as I pulled it out and opened it. Inside were documents, insurance documents, life insurance documents, with my name on them. I'd never seen these papers before, never signed them, but there was my signature, clear as day, on a policy that had been updated 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. Right around the time Ethan had suddenly become insistent about scheduling my surgery before the holidays. The policy amount made my stomach drop. $500,000. $500,000 if I died from complications during a medical procedure. The beneficiary was listed as Ethan Patterson, my loving husband. I sat on the edge of our bed, the bed where we'd slept side by side for 3 years, where he'd held me when I cried about losing my job last year, where we'd made promises to each other about forever, and I felt something inside me crack wide open. Not my heart breaking, something else. My illusions, maybe. My trust. My belief that the person sleeping next to me every night actually loved me. The anesthesiologist wasn't trying to protect me from a medical error. He wasn't worried about a mistake during surgery. He was trying to protect me from the man I'd promised to love and cherish until death do us part. The man who, apparently, was trying to make that until death part happen a lot sooner than I'd planned. I heard the garage door open. Ethan's footsteps in the hallway. I quickly shoved the envelope back under the sweaters, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it from the other room. "Sarah," he called out. "Where are you?" "Bedroom," I answered, my voice somehow steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. "Just lying down. Still not feeling great." He appeared in the doorway, and I saw him differently now. Same brown hair, same blue eyes, same face I'd woken up next to for 3 years. But now it was like looking at a stranger wearing a mask of someone I used to know. "You should rest," he said, his voice gentle, concerned. "We'll reschedule the surgery. Maybe next week would be better." Next week? He was already planning the next attempt. And I smiled at him, actually smiled, and said, "Yeah, maybe next week." Because now I knew. Now I understood. And I needed to figure out how to survive long enough to stop whatever he had planned. The silence in the car on the way home had been thick, suffocating, but nothing compared to the silence that filled our house that night. Ethan was irritated, not because I was scared, not because I was in pain, but because I had messed up the plans. He never said it directly, but I felt it in every glance, every heavy sigh, every deliberate movement away from me. He looked at me like I'd committed a crime, like I'd betrayed him by choosing to stay alive. That's when it really hit me, how much I'd been ignoring signs because of loneliness, because of fear of being alone, because I'd been accepting the bare minimum of love he offered and calling it enough. I'd been so starved for affection that I'd convinced myself his cold distance was just his personality, that his family's cruelty was something I needed to endure to prove I was worthy of staying. I remembered our wedding day 3 years ago, a small ceremony at his mother's insistence because big weddings are wasteful. I remembered how his sister had worn white to my wedding, and when I gently mentioned it to Ethan, he'd said I was being petty and insecure. I remembered how his mother had introduced me to guests as Ethan's girlfriend, even after we'd exchanged vows. I remembered thinking that if I just tried harder, loved him better, made myself smaller and quieter and more convenient, they would eventually accept me. But they never intended to accept me. They intended to use me, and then erase me. That night, while Ethan pretended to sleep beside me, I could tell he was pretending because his breathing wasn't steady, wasn't deep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly overhead, watching shadows dance across the popcorn texture of our bedroom ceiling. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every time he shifted position, my muscles tensed, ready to run. I was afraid to close my eyes in my own bed, in my own home, next to my own husband. Around 2 in the morning, when I was certain he was finally asleep, his breathing had changed, become heavy and regular. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could. The hardwood floor was cold under my bare feet, and I had to step carefully to avoid the spots that creaked. I made my way down the hallway like a thief in my own house, past the bathroom with its leaky faucet we'd been meaning to fix, past the spare bedroom that was supposed to become a nursery someday, down the stairs gripping the railing so tightly my fingers ached. The garage was dark and smelled like motor oil and sawdust. Ethan's workshop was his sanctuary, the one place in the house he'd explicitly told me was his space. I'd respected that boundary for 3 years, never questioning why he needed a room I wasn't allowed to enter freely. Now, standing there in my pajamas with my phone flashlight cutting through the darkness, I realized how many boundaries I'd respected while he'd been crossing the ultimate one, planning my death. His tool cabinet stood against the far wall, red metal with multiple drawers. I started at the top and worked my way down. Screwdrivers, wrenches, nails, sandpaper. Normal things. Innocent things. But in the bottom drawer, hidden under a tarp and a box of old fishing lures he never used, I found it. Another envelope, thicker than the first one. Inside were more insurance documents, but these were older. And they weren't about me. The name on these papers was Jennifer Patterson, Ethan's first wife. The woman his family never talked about. The woman whose existence I'd only learned about 6 months into our relationship when I'd found an old photo album in the attic. She died, Ethan had said when I'd asked about her, his face carefully blank. Medical complication during a routine surgery. It was tragic. I don't like to talk about it, and I'd never pushed. I'd respected his grief, his pain, his need for privacy. What kind of monster would I be to force him to relive losing his first wife? But now, looking at these documents, I saw that Jennifer Patterson had died 7 years ago during what was supposed to be a minor surgical procedure. and she'd had a life insurance policy worth $300,000, with Ethan as the sole beneficiary. My hands started shaking so violently I almost dropped the papers. The date swam before my eyes. Jennifer had died in November. It was November now. She'd been 28. I was 27. She'd had the surgery at Mercy Hospital, the same hospital where I'd been scheduled today. But there was more. Tucked behind Jennifer's insurance documents was a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age, the paper brittle under my fingers. The headline read, "Local woman dies from surgical complications, family questions hospital procedures." I read the article twice, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Jennifer's family had tried to push for an investigation. They'd claimed something wasn't right about her death. But the case had been closed after the hospital's internal review found no evidence of malpractice. The attending anesthesiologist had been transferred to another facility for unrelated reasons. The anesthesiologist, the same one who'd warned me today. It had to be. How many anesthesiologists get transferred under mysterious circumstances after a patient dies unexpectedly? I took photos of everything with trembling hands, the flash seeming impossibly bright in the dark garage, each click of the camera shutter making me freeze and listen for footsteps. Then I carefully put everything back exactly as I'd found it, arranging the tarp and the fishing lures in the same position, closing the drawer slowly to avoid any sound. When I climbed back into bed, Ethan rolled over. "Where were you?" he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. "Bathroom," I whispered. "Couldn't sleep." He made a non-committal sound and rolled back over. Within minutes, his breathing had evened out again. But I lay there rigid, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Ethan hadn't just married me. He'd replaced Jennifer with me. Same age range. Same build. We were both small, both brunette. And now, same fate planned. He'd probably spent years perfecting this. Learning from whatever mistakes had made Jennifer's family suspicious. Making sure this time, there would be no questions, no investigation, just a grieving widower collecting insurance money. I thought about his insistence on keeping our finances separate. "It's more modern," he'd said. "More independent." Now I realized it was so I'd never see how he was spending money, never notice if he was paying off someone at the hospital, never question unusual expenses. I thought about how he'd isolated me from my friends and family, slowly and systematically. "Your mother is so judgmental," he'd say. "Your friends don't really understand you like I do." One by one, I'd pulled away from everyone who might have noticed something was wrong, who might have asked questions if I died suddenly. I thought about his family's strange behavior, how his mother had asked about my medical history at Thanksgiving last year, how his sister had made comments about whether I had a will, how his brother had mentioned that young people should always have life insurance, you never know what could happen. They'd all known. They'd all been part of this. Maybe they'd been part of it with Jennifer too. As dawn started to break through our bedroom curtains, painting everything in shades of gray and pale blue, I made a decision. I couldn't go to the police, not yet. I had no proof, just documents that could be explained away as normal financial planning and coincidence. I couldn't go to my family. They'd stopped believing me months ago when I'd tried to tell them how isolated I felt, how controlled. Ethan had done too good a job painting me as dramatic and unstable. But I could go to the one person who'd already risked everything to warn me. The anesthesiologist who'd seen this pattern before. The one who'd lost his career trying to save Jennifer and was apparently willing to risk it again to save me. I just needed to find him before Ethan scheduled that surgery again. Before whatever plan he had in motion moved forward. Before I became another tragic news story about a young woman who died too soon from unexpected complications. The next morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. I'd barely slept, maybe an hour of fitful unconsciousness where I dreamed of operating rooms and insurance documents with my name written in blood. When my phone rang at 8:30, I was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I couldn't drink, watching Ethan make breakfast like we were a normal couple living a normal life. The caller ID showed Mercy Hospital. My entire body went cold. "Hello," I answered, my voice barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Patterson? This is Linda from Surgical Scheduling at Mercy Hospital. I'm calling to confirm your surgery appointment for tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. You'll need to arrive by 5 for pre-op preparation. Tomorrow, 6 a.m. I hadn't rescheduled anything. I didn't make an appointment," I said slowly, watching Ethan's back as he stood at the stove. His shoulders had tensed the moment my phone rang. He was listening to every word. "Oh, but I have it right here in our system. Your husband called yesterday afternoon and rescheduled on your behalf. He said you were feeling better and wanted to get it done as soon as possible." Linda's voice was cheerful, completely unaware that she was potentially confirming my execution date. My hand started shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the phone. Ethan had rescheduled. Without asking me, without telling me, just decided that tomorrow would be the day, and expected me to show up like an obedient wife walking to her own death. Can I call you back?" I managed to say. "I need to check my calendar." "Of course, but please call soon. If you need to cancel, we'll need at least 12 hours notice." I hung up before Ethan could turn around, but he did anyway, spatula in hand, that same concerned expression on his face that I now recognized as a mask. "Who was that?" "Wrong number." I lied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. He studied me for a long moment, those blue eyes I used to find so beautiful now looking cold and calculating. "You sure? You look pale. Just tired. Didn't sleep well." That part, at least, was true. He served breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, my favorite, and we ate in silence. Every bite felt like swallowing stones. I kept thinking about how he'd made this same breakfast the morning of my originally scheduled surgery. How he'd been so attentive, so caring, making sure I didn't eat or drink anything after midnight like the pre-op instructions required. Playing the role of devoted husband, right up until the moment he planned to become a widower. After breakfast, Ethan announced he had to run some errands. "Need anything from the store?" he asked, grabbing his keys, his wallet, that phone he always walked away with when it rang. "No, I'm good." The moment his truck pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my phone with shaking hands. I pulled up the photos I'd taken of the documents last night, zooming in on the newspaper article about Jennifer. At the bottom, in small print, it listed the name of the anesthesiologist who'd been on duty, Dr. Marcus Webb. I opened a new browser and typed his name into Google. Several results came up, a LinkedIn profile, a mention in a medical journal, and then buried on the third page of results, a local news article from 6 years ago. Anesthesiologist files complaint, claims hospital covered up patient death. The article was brief, clearly written before the story was buried. Dr. Marcus Webb had filed a formal complaint alleging that Jennifer Patterson's death had not been accidental, that there were irregularities in her medical charts, that he'd observed suspicious behavior from family members present during the surgery. His complaint had been dismissed. He'd been quietly transferred to another hospital. The investigation had gone nowhere. But he'd tried. He'd risked everything to expose the truth, and no one had believed him. I searched for his current workplace and found he was now at Mercy Hospital, the same hospital where my surgery had been scheduled. He must have seen my name, seen Ethan Patterson listed as my husband, and recognized the pattern immediately. That's why he'd warned me. That's why he'd slipped me that note. He knew. He'd always known. I needed to talk to him, but I couldn't risk calling the hospital directly. Ethan might check our phone records. He'd done it before, claiming he was just making sure our bill was correct, but really checking who I was talking to, who I was texting, maintaining control over every aspect of my life. I found Dr. Webb's email address through the hospital directory and sent him a message from a new email account I created right there in my kitchen. "This is Sarah Patterson. We met yesterday. I know about Jennifer. Please call me. I need help." I included my phone number and hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I waited. Every minute felt like an hour. I paced our small living room, past the couch where Ethan and I used to watch movies, past the bookshelf filled with books I'd stopped reading because he always made comments about wasting time, past the wedding photos on the wall that now looked like crime scene evidence. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hello, Mrs. Patterson?" The voice was familiar, tired, cautious, the same voice that had whispered a warning in the pre-op room. "This is Marcus Webb. I got your email." Relief flooded through me so intensely I had to sit down. "Thank you for calling. Thank you for warning me yesterday." Are you safe right now?" he interrupted. "Is he there?" "No, he's out. But he rescheduled my surgery. For tomorrow morning. Without telling me." My voice cracked. I found the insurance documents. Both policies. Mine and Jennifer's. There was a long pause on the other end. When Dr. Webb spoke again, his voice was heavy with something that sounded like guilt. "I knew it. The moment I saw your chart, saw his name, I knew. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Patterson. I should have done more back then. I should have fought harder." "Tell me what happened," I said. "Please." I need to know what I'm dealing with. He took a deep breath, and I could hear the weight of years of guilt in it. Jennifer Patterson was my patient 7 years ago. Routine surgery just like yours. But the night before the procedure, her husband, your husband, came to the hospital. I saw him talking to the surgical nurse, saw money change hands. I reported it, but I had no proof, and he denied everything. During the surgery, there were irregularities. Medications that shouldn't have been used. Dosages that were off. Jennifer went into cardiac arrest on the table. We couldn't save her. My stomach turned. And no one investigated? They did an internal review. Everything was ruled accidental. The nurse who took the money retired suddenly with a generous severance package. I was labeled a troublemaker and transferred. Jennifer's family tried to push for a criminal investigation, but without concrete evidence, it went nowhere. Her death was officially ruled as complications from anesthesia, a tragic but natural occurrence. But it wasn't natural, I whispered. No, it wasn't. And when I saw your name on yesterday's schedule, saw your age, your medical history, the type of surgery, it was identical. Even the timing. November. 7 years later. He's doing it again, and this time he's perfected his approach. I felt tears streaming down my face. What do I do? I can't go to the police. I have no proof. Just documents that could be explained away. My own family doesn't believe me when I tell them something's wrong. He's isolated me so completely that I have no one. You have me, Dr. Webb said firmly. And this time I'm not backing down. But you need to understand something, Mrs. Patterson. You're in immediate danger. If that surgery is scheduled for tomorrow, that means everything is already in place. The money has already changed hands. The people involved are already committed. If you don't show up tomorrow, he'll know you're onto him. And desperate people do desperate things. A car door slammed outside. My heart stopped. Through the window, I could see Ethan's truck in the driveway. He was back much sooner than expected. He's here, I whispered into the phone, panic rising in my throat. What do I do? Act normal. Don't let him know you suspect anything. I'm going to make some calls, reach out to Jennifer's family, see if I can find the nurse who was involved. We need evidence, and we need it fast. Can you get out of the house tonight? I don't know. He's been watching me closely. Try. Meet me at the Starbucks on Pacific Avenue at 9 tonight. Come alone, make sure he doesn't follow you. We'll figure this out together. Okay. I breathed, then hung up just as the front door opened. Ethan walked in carrying a single grocery bag. He set it on the counter and smiled at me, that same charming smile that had made me fall in love with him 4 years ago at a friend's barbecue. Back when I thought I'd found someone who would protect me, cherish me, build a life with me. Got you some of that tea you like, he said, pulling out a box of chamomile. Thought it might help you sleep tonight. You'll want to be well rested for tomorrow. For tomorrow. For my surgery. For the day he planned to kill me. I forced myself to smile back. That's so thoughtful. Thank you. And as he moved closer to kiss my forehead, a gesture that once made me feel loved and now made my skin crawl, I realized something terrifying. I was now living with my own murderer, pretending everything was fine, counting down the hours until I could escape to meet the one person who believed me. 12 hours until 9 p.m. 12 hours to survive in this house, in this marriage, in this nightmare that was once my life. I just prayed it would be enough time. The hours crawled by like wounded animals. I watched the clock on our kitchen wall, a wedding gift from Ethan's mother, white with black hands that seemed to move slower with each passing second. 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., each hour bringing me closer to 9 o'clock, closer to meeting Dr. Webb, closer to potential escape. But also bringing me closer to tomorrow morning's surgery, to the moment when Ethan's plan would unfold if I didn't do something to stop it. Ethan was being unusually attentive. He made lunch, grilled cheese sandwiches, another one of my favorites, and sat across from me at our small kitchen table, asking about my day, about how I was feeling, about whether I was nervous for tomorrow. Playing the concerned husband so convincingly that if I didn't know better, I might have believed him. Might have thought I was crazy for suspecting anything. You seem tense, he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. His palm was warm, his grip firm. Once, that touch had made me feel safe. Now it made me want to run. It's just a simple procedure, honey. You'll be in and out before you know it. In and out. Like Jennifer. Except Jennifer had never made it out. I know, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. Just normal pre-surgery jitters, I guess. He squeezed my hand, and I saw something flicker across his face. Satisfaction, maybe? Or anticipation. It was gone so quickly I might have imagined it, but I didn't think so. I'd become an expert at reading the micro-expressions he thought he was hiding, the tiny reveals that showed what was really happening behind those calculated blue eyes. Around 6 p.m., his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and that flicker crossed his face again. "I need to take this," he said, standing up abruptly. "Work stuff." But he didn't go to his office or even to another room. He walked out to the backyard, closing the sliding glass door behind him. Through the kitchen window, I watched him pace back and forth on our small patch of lawn, the November evening already dark, the motion sensor light casting harsh shadows across his face as he talked. I moved closer to the window, my heart pounding. The door wasn't completely closed. He'd left it open just a crack, probably to keep an eye on me. His voice carried through the gap, muffled but audible if I strained to hear. "Tomorrow morning, everything's set," he was saying. "No, she doesn't suspect anything. She's nervous, but that's normal." "Yes, same as last time." I know. It took 7 years, but this one's cleaner. No family asking questions, no one to investigate. The money transfers as soon as the death certificate is filed. No, she has no idea about the policy amount." My legs nearly gave out. I had to grip the counter to stay upright. Everything I'd suspected, everything I'd feared, he was confirming in casual conversation. Talking about my death like it was a business transaction, like I was just paperwork to be processed, like 7 years ago he hadn't done the exact same thing to another woman who'd trusted him. "After this, we're free," he continued, his voice dropping lower. "We can finally be together without hiding, without pretending. I'm so tired of pretending to love her." The words hit me like physical blows. Pretending to love her. 3 years of marriage, 3 years of me trying so hard to be enough, to be worthy, to make him happy. And he'd been pretending the entire time. Every "I love you," every kiss, every moment I'd thought we were building a life together had been an act. A performance. A long con leading to this moment. "I have to go," Ethan said suddenly. "She's probably wondering what's taking so long. Tomorrow ends this. After tomorrow, we're free." He hung up and stood there for a moment, his back to the house, his shoulders rising and falling with deep breaths. Then he rolled his neck, plastered on a smile, and turned back toward the sliding door. I barely had time to move away from the window, to position myself at the sink like I'd been washing dishes the whole time. "Everything okay?" I asked when he came back inside, proud of how normal my voice sounded despite the screaming in my head. "Yeah, just boring work stuff. Budget meetings." He moved behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. Once, this would have made me melt. Now it made my skin crawl, made every muscle in my body tense with the effort of not flinching away. "I love you, you know that?" Lies. All lies. "I love you too," I said, the words tasting like poison. He kissed my neck, and I had to close my eyes and think about anything else, about Dr. Webb, about Jennifer, about surviving the next few hours, to keep from screaming, from pushing him away, from showing him that I knew everything. At 8 p.m., I made my move. "I think I'm going to take a bath," I told him. "Try to relax before tomorrow." "Good idea," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "Take your time." I went upstairs, turned on the bathroom water to make it sound convincing, then quietly changed into jeans and a sweater. I grabbed my purse with my phone, wallet, and the photos I'd taken of the insurance documents. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely zip the bag. The bathroom window faced the side yard. It was small, but I was small too. I'd fit. I had to fit. I climbed up onto the toilet, pushed the window open as quietly as I could, and squeezed through, scraping my hip on the frame, biting my lip to keep from crying out. The drop to the ground was about 6 feet. I hung from the windowsill for a moment, my arms burning, then let go. I hit the grass hard, the impact jarring my ankles, but I didn't have time to care about pain. I ran through our neighbor's yard, staying low, staying in shadows, my breath coming in short gasps that created little clouds in the cold November air. Pacific Avenue was 3 blocks away. I could make it. I had to make it. Behind me, I heard our front door open. Ethan's voice calling my name. "Sarah? Sarah, where are you?" He discovered I was gone. Maybe he'd heard the window, or maybe the bath had been running too long. Either way, he knew. I ran faster, my lungs burning, my legs pumping, cutting through yards and alleys I'd walked past 100 times but never really seen. A dog barked. A motion sensor light flickered on. Someone's TV blared through an open window. Normal suburban sounds on a normal suburban night, except nothing was normal anymore. I could hear his truck starting, the engine roaring to life. He was coming after me. The Starbucks appeared ahead like a beacon, its green logo glowing in the darkness. I burst through the door, gasping for breath, looking desperately around. The cafe was nearly empty, a college student with headphones on, a couple sharing a dessert, and there, in the back corner, Dr. Marcus Webb, his tired eyes going wide when he saw me. I stumbled toward him, my legs finally giving out, collapsing into the chair across from him. "He knows," I gasped. "He knows I'm gone. He's looking for me right now." Dr. Webb's face went pale. He pulled out his phone, but before he could dial, I saw through the window what made my blood turn to ice. Ethan's truck, pulling into the parking lot. His eyes scanning the windows, landing on mine. And then the most terrifying thing happened. He didn't look angry. He didn't look panicked. He smiled. A cold, calculated smile that said he'd been expecting this. That he'd planned for this. That no matter how far I ran, no matter who I told, I was still trapped in his game. He got out of the truck and started walking toward the Starbucks door. Dr. Webb grabbed my arm. "The back exit. Now." But as we stood, I saw something that made my heart stop completely. Behind Ethan's truck, another car was pulling in, and getting out of it were his mother and his sister, both wearing the same cold smiles. They'd all been in on it, the entire family, and they were here to make sure their plan didn't fall apart. We were surrounded, and I realized that my attempt at escape might have just sealed my fate. "Move," Dr. Webb hissed, pulling me toward the back of the cafe. But my legs felt like concrete, my body frozen in pure terror as I watched Ethan push through the Starbucks door, his mother and sister flanking him like predators closing in on wounded prey. The barista looked up, startled by the sudden tension. The college student pulled off his headphones. The couple stopped mid-conversation. Everyone could feel it, that electric charge in the air before something terrible happens. "Sarah," Ethan called out, his voice loud enough to carry across the entire cafe, but somehow still managing to sound gentle, concerned. "Honey, you're scaring me. What are you doing? Who is this man? He was good. So good." To anyone watching, he looked like a worried husband who'd found his unstable wife with a strange man. His mother put her hand to her chest in theatrical concern. His sister pulled out her phone, probably ready to call the police and report me as a danger to myself. Dr. Webb stepped in front of me, his body a shield. "Mr. Patterson," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor I could feel in his hand still gripping my arm. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation. About Jennifer." The change in Ethan's face was instantaneous. The concerned husband mask slipped, just for a second, revealing something cold and reptilian underneath. His mother's fake concern vanished, replaced by a hardness that made her look 10 years older. His sister's phone lowered slightly, her expression calculating. "I don't know what lies this man has been telling you," Ethan said, but he was looking at Dr. Webb now, not me. "But he's unstable. He was fired from his last job for making false accusations. He's obsessed with my family, with my first wife's death. This is harassment." "Is it?" Dr. Webb's voice got louder, harder. "Is it harassment to try to save someone's life? Is it harassment to refuse to stay silent while you plan to murder your second wife the same way you murdered your first?" The word murder hung in the air like a bomb. The other customers were definitely paying attention now. The barista had her hand on the phone behind the counter. This could go very wrong very quickly. "You're insane," Ethan's mother spat. "My son is a good man. His first wife died from a tragic medical accident. And now you're trying to turn his current wife against him? For what? Some delusional vendetta?" But Dr. Webb didn't back down. Instead, he did something I never expected. He pulled out his phone and started playing an audio recording. His own voice came through the speaker, shaky but clear. "This is Dr. Marcus Webb, recording my statement on November 15th, 7 years ago. I witnessed Ethan Patterson speaking with surgical nurse Rebecca Chin the night before his wife Jennifer's surgery. I saw money exchanged. During the surgery, I observed irregularities in medication administration. Jennifer Patterson went into cardiac arrest and could not be revived. I believe her death was not accidental." He stopped the recording and looked at Ethan. "I've kept this recording for 7 years, along with copies of Jennifer's medical charts that show the discrepancies I documented, along with bank records showing a deposit of $15,000 into Rebecca Chen's account the day after Jennifer died. I couldn't prove it then. I had no one to back me up. But I kept everything." Ethan's face had gone white. His mother grabbed his arm. His sister took a step backward. And 2 days ago, Dr. Webb continued, his voice growing stronger, I reached out to Jennifer's family. Her sister, Rachel, has been investigating privately for years. She never believed the official story, and she's been gathering evidence. Security footage from the hospital that was supposedly erased, but that she managed to recover from a backup server. Testimony from a janitor who saw Ethan and Nurse Chen meeting multiple times before the surgery. Financial records showing a life insurance policy that was updated just weeks before Jennifer's death. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. He'd been investigating. All these years, he'd been preparing for this moment. Rachel is outside right now, Dr. Webb said, nodding toward the window. With a detective from the Tacoma Police Department. They've been building a case. And when Sarah's surgery was scheduled, when I saw the same pattern repeating, I contacted them. They've been watching you, Mr. Patterson. Watching all of you. I turned to look out the window and saw it was true. A woman who must be Rachel stood next to a man in a suit, both of them watching through the glass. Behind them, a police cruiser pulled into the parking lot, its lights dark, but its presence unmistakable. Ethan's sister bolted for the door, but Dr. Webb called out, I wouldn't. There are officers at every exit. The cafe had gone completely silent. Even the espresso machine seemed to have stopped hissing. Everyone was watching this scene unfold like it was a movie, except it was my life, my nightmare, my near-death experience playing out in real time. Ethan's composure finally cracked. You have no idea what you've done, he said, his voice low and venomous. No idea what you've interfered with. She's nothing. Just like Jennifer was nothing. Just obstacles. Just women you married for money and planned to kill, Dr. Webb finished. We know about the gambling debts. We know about the business that failed. We know about the insurance fraud scheme your whole family has been running. My knees finally gave out. I sank into the chair behind me, my entire body shaking. Insurance fraud scheme. The whole family. How deep did this go? Jennifer wasn't your first, was she? Dr. Webb said quietly. Rachel found records. Your uncle's wife, who died in a car accident 15 years ago. Your cousin's girlfriend, who drowned 5 years before that. All with updated life insurance policies. All with family members who benefited. And all ruled as accidents. Ethan's mother lunged forward, but Dr. Webb didn't flinch. You're all monsters, she hissed. You don't understand. We built this family from nothing. We do what we have to do to survive. You kill innocent women, I said, my voice cracking. It was the first time I'd spoken since they'd arrived, and my words seemed to cut through everything. You marry them, make them love you, isolate them from everyone who might protect them, and then you murder them for insurance money. That's not survival. That's evil. Ethan looked at me then, really looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes made me understand something terrible. He'd never seen me as a person. Not once in 3 years. I'd been a mark from the moment we met at that barbecue. Every smile, every I love you, every gentle touch had been calculated. He'd probably targeted me specifically, someone isolated, someone desperate for love, someone whose family wouldn't ask too many questions. The police entered then, 3 officers moving quickly and efficiently. Ethan Patterson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and insurance fraud, one of them said, pulling out handcuffs. Everything happened so fast after that. Ethan was cuffed and read his rights. His mother started screaming about lawyers and false accusations. His sister tried to run and was caught immediately. More police arrived. Detectives. Crime scene investigators, even though the crime hadn't happened yet. Because I was alive, because Dr. Webb had saved me. Rachel, Jennifer's sister, came inside and walked straight to me. She had Jennifer's eyes, sad and knowing. I'm so sorry, she said, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry we couldn't save you sooner. I've been trying to prove what they did to my sister for 7 years. When Marcus contacted me about you, I knew we couldn't let it happen again. I couldn't speak, could only cry, could only let this stranger who'd lost her sister hold me while my husband, my attempted murderer, was led away in handcuffs, still maintaining his innocence, still trying to manipulate everyone around him even as the evidence crushed him. Dr. Webb sat down heavily in the chair next to mine. He looked exhausted, years of guilt and determination etched into every line of his face. I couldn't save Jennifer, he said softly. I tried, but I wasn't fast enough, wasn't smart enough, didn't have enough proof. I've lived with that failure every single day for 7 years. When I saw your name on that surgery schedule, saw your chart, saw him listed as your husband, I knew I was getting a second chance. I couldn't fail again. You didn't, I whispered. You saved my life. But even as I said it, I knew the truth would take a long time to fully sink in. I'd been married to a murderer, had shared a bed with someone who was planning to kill me, had loved someone who'd only ever seen me as a payday. The man I'd trusted with my future had been carefully orchestrating my death. And if Dr. Webb hadn't been willing to risk everything one more time, I would have walked into that operating room tomorrow morning and never walked out. The police took me to a temporary shelter in a neighboring town, a nondescript building with beige walls and fluorescent lighting that hummed constantly, filled with other women who'd escaped dangerous situations. I spent the first 3 days in a haze, barely eating, barely sleeping, jumping at every sound. Every time a door opened, I expected to see Ethan standing there with that cold smile, as if the arrest had been a dream and he was coming to finish what he'd started. But the real nightmare came on day 4, when my phone rang. My mother's name flashed on the screen. For a moment, I felt relief. Finally, someone from my family reaching out, someone who cared, someone who believed me. I answered with tears already forming in my eyes. Mom, how could you do this to him? Her voice was sharp, accusatory, nothing like the comfort I desperately needed. Ethan called your father from jail, Sarah. He told us everything. How you've been mentally unstable, how you're having delusions, how you ran off with some man who's been stalking you both. The words hit me like a physical assault. I couldn't breathe. Mom, that's not true. He tried to kill me. He killed his first wife. The police arrested him for it. The police made a mistake, she interrupted. Ethan's lawyer is already working on it. This Dr. Webb has apparently been harassing the Patterson family for years. He's obsessed, Sarah, and somehow he's convinced you to participate in his delusions. You need help. Psychiatric help. I started shaking, the phone nearly slipping from my trembling hands. You don't believe me. I believe you're having a mental health crisis, my mother said, and I could hear the mixture of pity and disappointment in her voice. Ethan showed your father the medical records from your therapist last year. The depression, the anxiety medications. He said you've been getting worse, that he's been trying to get you help, but you've been refusing treatment. Medical records that I'd shared with Ethan in confidence. During our first year of marriage, when I'd been struggling to adjust to his family's cruelty, when I'd thought the problem was inside me rather than the situation I was trapped in. He'd kept those records, weaponized them, turned my vulnerability into evidence of my instability. He's lying, I whispered. Mom, please. You have to believe me. He was going to kill me. Your cousin Amy spoke to Ethan's mother. My mom continued as if I hadn't spoken. She said you've always been jealous of their family, that you've been trying to turn Ethan against them. And your Uncle Robert said he saw you at Thanksgiving last year acting strangely, talking to yourself in the kitchen. I hadn't been talking to myself. I'd been crying quietly after Ethan's sister had made another comment about my weight, about how some women just can't maintain themselves after marriage. But Uncle Robert had seen me from a distance, had apparently mentioned it to my mother, and now that observation was being twisted into evidence of mental illness. Even your father thinks you need help, my mother said, her voice softening slightly, which somehow made it worse. Come home, Sarah. Let us take care of you. We'll get you into a good facility where... I hung up. I couldn't listen anymore. Couldn't hear my own mother suggest committing me to a psychiatric facility while my attempted murderer worked with his lawyers to go free. The phone rang again immediately. My father this time. Then my aunt. Then my cousin. Message after message, voicemail after voicemail, all with the same theme. I was unstable. I was having a breakdown. I needed help. Ethan was the victim here. I was destroying a good man's life with false accusations. Ethan had done exactly what Dr. Webb had warned me about. He'd turned everyone against me. He'd spent 3 years carefully building a narrative of my instability, gathering evidence, making sure that if his plan ever fell apart, I would be the one who looked crazy. Not him. Never him. I turned off my phone and curled up on the narrow bed in my temporary room, staring at the water-stained ceiling tiles, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my entire life. Even when I'd been married to Ethan, isolated and controlled, I'd at least had the illusion that somewhere out there, my family cared about me. That if things got really bad, I could go home. But there was no home anymore. They'd chosen his version of reality over mine. They'd chosen a murderer over their own daughter. The worst part was understanding how easily it had happened. Ethan was charming, successful, from a good family. I was the one with the history of depression and anxiety. I was the one who'd always been too sensitive, too emotional. too dramatic, according to my family. He'd simply taken qualities that were already there and weaponized them, turning my authentic emotions into symptoms of mental illness. On day 5, Dr. Webb came to visit. He looked terrible, exhausted, older than his years, with dark circles under his eyes that matched mine. He sat down heavily in the plastic chair across from my bed and didn't speak for a long moment. "I lost my job," he finally said. "The Patterson family filed a complaint with the medical board. Harassment, stalking, interfering with patient care. I've been suspended pending investigation." My stomach dropped. No, you saved my life. You exposed them. The police arrested them. The police arrested them based on circumstantial evidence that a good lawyer can challenge, he said quietly. The recording I had was from 7 years ago and could be argued as inadmissible. The financial records show suspicious timing, but not definitive proof of conspiracy. Nurse Rebecca Chin disappeared, probably paid off and relocated by the Patterson family. The security footage Rachel recovered was degraded enough that their lawyers are claiming it's been doctored. Without a completed crime, without you actually being harmed, it's much harder to prove intent to murder. I felt like I was falling, the room spinning around me. What are you saying? I'm saying Ethan's lawyer is very good and very expensive. The family has resources we didn't anticipate. They're painting me as an obsessed former employee with a grudge, and you as a mentally unstable woman I manipulated. The narrative is shifting. He looked at me with eyes full of guilt and sorrow. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I thought saving you would be enough. I thought the truth would matter. But sometimes the truth isn't enough against people with money and power and a willingness to destroy anyone who gets in their way. So he's going to go free? I could barely say the words. After everything? After Jennifer? After trying to kill me? His lawyers are pushing for bail. They're arguing he's not a flight risk, that he has strong community ties, that the charges are based on the accusations of 2 unreliable witnesses, you and me. His family has offered to put up their house as collateral. The judge is considering it. I started laughing then, a hysterical sound that turned into sobbing. Ethan could be out by the end of the week, walking free. While I was hiding in a shelter, estranged from my family, with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. He'd taken everything from me, my safety, my support system, my credibility, and he might not even serve a day in prison for it. Dr. Webb reached out and took my hand. His palm was warm, steady, an anchor in the storm. I won't let this go, he said firmly. Rachel won't either. We'll keep fighting. We'll find more evidence. We'll make sure justice is served, even if it takes another 7 years. But 7 years was a long time. 7 years of looking over my shoulder. 7 years of wondering if Ethan would come for me. 7 years of being the woman who'd accused a good man of attempted murder and couldn't prove it. I'd hit the bottom, lower than I'd ever imagined possible. My husband had tried to kill me, my family had abandoned me, and the man who'd saved my life was being punished for his heroism. This was supposed to be the part where good triumphed over evil, where the truth set everyone free. Instead, I was learning that sometimes the truth just makes you a target, and sometimes the bottom has a basement. It was Dr. Webb who had the final idea, born from desperation and 7 years of carrying guilt he couldn't shake. 2 weeks after Ethan made bail, 2 weeks of me jumping at shadows and sleeping with a chair wedged against my door, Marcus showed up at the shelter with a manila folder and determination burning in his exhausted eyes. I found someone, he said, sitting across from me in the common room where other women watched daytime television and tried to piece their shattered lives back together. A journalist, investigative reporter for the Seattle Times. His name is David Chin, no relation to the nurse, but ironically, that's what caught his attention. He's been looking into insurance fraud cases across Washington state. When I showed him everything we have, the documents, the patterns, the deaths spanning 15 years, he wants to run the story. My first instinct was fear. Ethan will sue. His lawyers will destroy us. They'll use it as proof that we're trying to manipulate public opinion. Maybe, Marcus admitted. But David found 3 more cases we didn't know about. 3 more women married into the Patterson extended family who died under suspicious circumstances over the past 20 years. All with life insurance policies. All ruled as accidents. The pattern goes back further than we thought, Sarah. This isn't just about you and Jennifer anymore. This is about a family that's been running a murder-for-profit scheme for 2 decades. The folder he handed me was thick with documentation. I flipped through it with trembling hands, seeing photocopies of death certificates, insurance claims, Wedding announcements followed months later by obituaries. Lisa Patterson, age 26, drowned while swimming alone. Michelle Patterson, age 30, fell down the stairs at home. Christina Patterson, age 29, died from complications during childbirth. All young women, all married into the Patterson family, all dead within 2 years of their weddings. How did no one see this pattern before? I whispered. Different last names after marriage, spread across different counties, different insurance companies, different medical examiners. The family was smart. They never hit the same hospital twice, never used the same method twice. And they waited years between incidents to avoid suspicion. Jennifer and you were the only ones close together in timing, probably because Ethan was in debt and desperate. David Chen's article ran on a Sunday morning, front page of the Seattle Times. The headline read, "A family business built on death, how one Washington family allegedly turned marriage into murder." It was exhaustive, meticulous, damning. Every case laid out chronologically. Financial records showing the family's business struggles and subsequent insurance payouts. Interviews with other family members of the deceased women, people who'd been quietly suspicious for years, but had no proof, no platform, no one who'd believed them. And most devastating of all, David had tracked down Rebecca Chin, the surgical nurse who'd disappeared after Jennifer's death. She was living in Portland under a different name, working as a receptionist at a dental office. When David found her and showed her the article, showed her the other deaths, showed her that she'd been part of something much larger than one bad decision she broke. She gave a full confession, on camera, with a lawyer present. She detailed how Ethan's uncle had first approached her 15 years ago, offering money to make a mistake during a routine surgery. How she'd refused at first, but was approached again years later when she was drowning in student loans. How she'd been paid $25,000 to administer the wrong dosage during Jennifer's surgery. How she'd been haunted by it every day since, living under a new identity, trying to outrun her guilt. I told myself it was a victimless crime, she sobbed on camera, mascara running down her face. The family said she was going to die anyway from complications, that I was just expediting the inevitable. But that was a lie. Jennifer Patterson was healthy. She would have survived that surgery. I killed her. And when I saw this article, saw all these other women, I realized I was part of a serial murder operation. The video went viral. Millions of views in the first 24 hours. The story exploded across social media, news networks, true crime podcasts. The Patterson family became infamous overnight. Ethan's bail was revoked immediately. His mother, sister, uncle, and 3 cousins were all arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder and insurance fraud spanning 2 decades. The medical board that had suspended Marcus not only reinstated him, but issued a public apology. He was called a hero by the governor herself, honored for his courage in speaking up when institutions had failed to listen. The Mercy Hospital, where everything had almost happened, offered him his old position back, with a raise and a formal apology for their handling of Jennifer's case 7 years ago. But the vindication came with a price I hadn't anticipated. My family finally called, not to apologize, but to complain. About the embarrassment, about seeing our family name in the news, about having to explain to their friends and neighbors that yes, that was their daughter who'd married into a family of murderers, who'd almost become a victim herself. "You could have handled this privately," my mother said during one devastating phone call. "Did you have to go to the press? Did you have to make such a spectacle?" I hung up on her. And this time, I didn't cry about it, because I'd learned something crucial. Some people will never believe you, never support you, never choose your safety over their own comfort. And those people, even if they're family, even if you love them, don't deserve space in your life. The trial was long and brutal. I had to testify, had to sit in a courtroom and relive every moment of terror, every manipulation, every lie. I had to face Ethan across that courtroom and watch him maintain his innocence, even as evidence piled up around him like a tomb. His lawyer tried to paint me as a scorned woman, as mentally unstable, as vindictive. But Rebecca Chen's testimony destroyed their defense. The financial records destroyed their defense. The pattern of death spanning 20 years destroyed their defense. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. Ethan Patterson was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole for conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and the murder of Jennifer Patterson. His mother received 25 years. His sister 15. The extended family members who'd participated in various schemes received sentences ranging from 10 to 20 years. Rebecca Chen, in exchange for her testimony, received 8 years in credit for time served. It was over. Really over. Not just surviving day to day, but actually over. Today, 3 years after that whispered warning in the pre-op room, I live in a small apartment in Seattle. I changed my name, not legally, just socially. I'm not Sarah Patterson anymore. That woman died in a Starbucks parking lot when her illusions shattered. I'm someone new now, someone stronger, someone who survived what was meant to kill her. Dr. Marcus Webb, and I meet for coffee once a month. He's thriving at his new position, using his experience to train other medical professionals on recognizing signs of domestic abuse and suspicious family behavior. He saved my life, and in doing so, he saved his own soul from the guilt that had been consuming him for 7 years. Rachel, Jennifer's sister, became one of my closest friends. We support each other through the aftermath, through the nightmares, through the days when the trauma feels fresh again. She says Jennifer would be proud that her death wasn't in vain, that it ultimately saved me and exposed a family of killers. When I close my eyes, I still remember that moment in the pre-op room. The cold smell of antiseptic, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and Dr. Webb leaning close, his voice barely a whisper. "Ma'am, postpone until tomorrow." That single sentence, 6 words delivered by a stranger with more courage than anyone I'd ever known, saved my life. It taught me that sometimes the love that saves us comes from the most unexpected places, while the love that destroys us sleeps beside us every night, wearing a familiar face and speaking in familiar words, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I survived. Not everyone does. And every day I wake up breathing is a day I choose to honor the women who weren't as lucky, who trusted the wrong people, who never got their warning. This is my testimony, my truth, my survival, and I'm finally free. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us deepest. Sarah's story reminds us that survival isn't just about physical strength. It's about trusting your instincts when everyone around you is telling you you're wrong. It's about finding the courage to run, even when you have nowhere to go. It's about accepting help from strangers who see your truth when your own family refuses to. Ask yourself, would you have had the strength to climb out that bathroom window? Would you have believed a stranger's warning over your husband's reassurances? Would you have kept fighting when your own parents turned against you? These are questions none of us want to face, but Sarah's survival depended on answering them in the moment when it mattered most. The most haunting part of this story isn't just that one man tried to kill his wife for money. It's that an entire family participated, that institutions failed, that warning signs were ignored for 20 years while innocent women died. It's a reminder that evil doesn't always look like a monster in the shadows. Sometimes it looks like a charming smile at a barbecue, a concerned husband in a hospital room, a respectable family at Sunday dinner. And sometimes the only thing standing between life and death is one person willing to whisper a warning and another person brave enough to listen. Dr. Webb saved Sarah's life not with grand heroics, but with 6 quiet words and the refusal to stay silent a second time. That's the kind of courage that changes everything. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you to trust your instincts and listen to those quiet warnings we all sometimes hear, please take a moment to follow this channel, leave a like, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Your engagement helps these important stories reach people who might be living their own nightmare right now, looking for the courage to escape. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply survive.